podcast Orang Berani bersama Amnesty International Indonesia.
Halo teman-teman, selamat datang kembali di podcast Orang Berani. Nah, sekarang bersama saya, Sadika Hamid dari Amnesty International Indonesia. Nah, podcast ini tujuannya itu mengajak kalian berkenalan dengan orang-orang berani. Siapakah mereka? Nah, mereka itu bisa jadi orang kaya, orang miskin, tua, muda, kakek, nenek, kayak iklan ya gitu. Nah, jadi mereka tuh bisa dari berbagai macam background, tapi mereka punya satu kemiripan. Mereka berani berbuat kebaikan walaupun kadang harus menentang arus, dicerca, dipenjara, pokoknya teraniaya lah hidupnya gitu. Nah, hari ini kita kedatangan orang berani yang spesial, pemain gitar dari Amerika Serikat, Tom Morello. Nah, dia ini musisi yang sangat produktif, membentuk banyak band dan juga punya banyak solo projects. Nah, tapi dia itu paling dikenal sebagai anggota band rap rock legendaris Rage Against the Machine. Terus kemudian dia juga membentuk Prophets of Rage dan juga Audioslave. Banyaklah bandnya, sampai bingung gue baca biografinya. Nah, Majalah Rolling Stones itu menempatkan dia ranking 26 dari 100 gitaris terbaik dunia. Dan BBC menyebut dia sebagai gitaris nomor 5 terbaik dalam 30 terakhir. Wow banget ya karirnya ya. Nah, di negara asalnya ini, Tom itu juga sangat dikenal sebagai aktivis. Nah, dia itu punya proyek solo. Jadi dia bilang itu alter egonya namanya Night Watchman. Nah, di situ dia alirannya beda lagi tuh. Jadi sebagai penyanyi folk. Nah, di situ itu dia bisa bebas mengungkapkan pandangan politiknya. Nah, dia juga mendirikan Axis of Justice. Itu sebuah organisasi nirlaba bersama Serj Tankian dari System of a Down. Nah, jadi itu tujuannya untuk menyatukan musisi dan pecinta musik dengan organisasi politik. Nah, bersama AOG ini, Tom sering kolaborasi dengan Amnesty International yang di Amerika Serikat. Nah, salah satunya tuh dia pernah membuat cover lagu The Killers yang judulnya Human untuk kampanye anti penyiksaan pada 2009. Nah, beberapa hari ini Tom lagi mampir ke Indonesia untuk menghadiri festival musik lintas genre Hodgepodge di Ancol. Nah, tapi dia di setengah kesibukannya itu menyempatkan waktu untuk bertemu dengan kalangan aktivis. Nah, sekarang langsung kita ngobrol-ngobrol ya dengan Tom. Hello Tom, how are you? Nice to have you here.
I'm well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, welcome to Indonesia. So is this your first time here?
It is my first time in Indonesia, and it is a pleasure to be here. It's a country that I've wanted to play in for a long time because fans have been so demanding that we play here for a very, very long time. So I'm glad we're finally able to do it.
Yes, because a lot of fans, they have learned, about, leftist books from you, especially when, during the New Order era when freedom of expression was repressed. So they learn more from you than maybe from, the local sources.
Sure, I understand. So, that was very much the case for me as well, and learning from groups like Public Enemy and The Clash, who provide an alternative source of news and inspiration. So if Rage Against the Machine or my work has been able to do that for people in Indonesia, that makes me very happy.
Okay. Great. So you have you just arrived here, but you already have quite a packed schedule. So and recently you just arrived and you met with local activists. So maybe can you, tell us a bit more about, your first impressions and what did you talk about them, if it's not a secret?
It's not a secret. No, I was very happy to meet with local activists from Amnesty International to union workers to some musicians and some different organizations, LGBTQ organizations. My connection with them is an American by the name of Jim Keedy. He was very active in the anti-sweatshop movement in the United States and actually moved to Indonesia to try to work in the Nike factories and ended up living with the factory workers. He and I worked together for years. Rage Against the Machine used to do a monthly Freedom Fighter of the Month award. Jim was the recipient of that award for his work in Indonesia. We became friends, and he later ran my nonprofit organization, Axis of Justice. So his tales of Indonesia have made me want to travel here and meet the brave workers and activists who have been part of trying to transform the country. So it's very, very exciting to be here. And to meet some of them today, as well as the younger generation, was very inspiring to me.
Okay, so what was, during what was said during the discussion, is that something, notable that you remember?
Yeah, it was a very wide-ranging discussion, and for me it was good to sort of learn some of their stories. And there was one man, I think of German background, who was a diver, like a deep-sea diver, and his diving had brought him in contact to illegal Chinese mining of some small island. Then he devoted his life to stopping and was successful with the help of many others. I got to hear the stories of there was a musician who has also tried to speak truth to power and espouse social justice movements through their music, and a dozen or so other activists who shared their stories. And it's a reminder to me that the way that the world changes is not from brilliant presidents or fantastic laws being passed. It's average, everyday people standing up in their place and time for what's right. And the genesis of all progressive, radical, or even revolutionary change has come from people who have no more power, courage, creativity, money, or intelligence than anyone listening to this right now. That's how the world changes. It's you that change it. And that's that's been sort of a central theme of my work, is that the audience are the agents of history who can transform their homes, their schools, their place of work, their country, and the world.
Okay, so you have always known to be, you always want to be close to the ground, even though you're touring, during your last tour, you would spend, a day or two volunteering, so it's not just, usually artists, they just, I don't know, but a lot of them just give proceeds from, from their music sales, to the charity, but
which is a good thing as well. Yeah.
It is a good thing as well, but you take a step beyond that.
Sure. Well, I come from I've always self-identified as an activist. I started my political activism and my guitar playing started around the same time. I started playing guitar at 17. And I formed an underground newspaper at my high school at 16. So it was around. It was sort of like the dual passions were to. I always really thought of from the time I was a teenager. I identified as a revolutionary, and at the time that when I was 17 years old, they were thinking about reinstituting the draft in the United States because there was the troubles in central, like there was Sandinista Nicaragua in America. Reagan was going to invade, and to me, I thought there's the real chance that I will be drafted to fight in the army against a cause that I believe in. And so at the time, the issue was very, very important to me was South Africa and apartheid. And so I wrote a letter. Nelson Mandela was in jail, but I forget the name of the person who was in charge of the ANC and I wrote him a letter saying, if I get drafted for the United States Army, I'm not going to go. I'm going to move to South Africa and volunteer to fight with the ANC against racist South Africa. So it was like, from the time I was a kid, it was very, very important to me to be involved in changing the world, not just playing music and giving money away.
So, if we go back a little bit, what makes you become a revolutionary? So what does it come from? Is it your upbringing, or what drives you to become
I think it's two things. One is definitely, some of it is in the DNA. My great uncle was Jomo Kenyatta, who led Kenya's independence struggle against Great Britain, and my father was involved in the independence struggle as well. I didn't know my dad growing up, but certainly the knowledge of that anti-colonial history was strong in my family. My mom is a much more radical person, leftist radical than I am. I always tell people that I'm the second most popular one in the family and the second most radical one in the family. So it really is Mary Morello who raised. She was a Irish Italian white lady who raised a black kid in a conservative town with this radical politics in her that is really. That's certainly part of my DNA. I believe, though, that my politicization didn't happen from my parents. It happened from the playground. As the only black kid in an all-white town, I met racism at a very, very young age, and the feeling of this kind of injustice and like how could people be so hateful and so wrong based on the color? It made me indignant, and that really was the beginning that fueled my fight. My mom taught me at 4 or 5 years old about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the Black Panthers, and those were really a part of my youngest childhood memories were learning about racism firsthand and hearing about fighting against it.
Oh wow! So and then. How do you find the courage, as a, maybe a lot of people consider you as, minority because of your skin. So, but how do you find the courage, to fight against the haters?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is historical example. For me, like a lot of people complain, like you're a guitar player, so you should just play music. Well, to me, like my heroes have been, radicals and revolutionaries who could care less about what someone thinks about someone. Like to me, it doesn't even. First of all, I believe very strongly in the First Amendment and freedom of speech. And just because you pick up a guitar does not mean you relinquish your right to an opinion and expressing it. But then, secondly, like if your heroes have been people who have been actively involved in changing the world, I look at my music as almost like missionary work in a way.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's like missionary work. It's like first of all, you have to be no one's going to care what you're singing about unless you're a great band. So you have to rock.
You have to strive to be great.
You have to rock people. You have to rock people to be, or no one's going to care. You can sing if you put a beat to Noam Chomsky, it wouldn't be good. You know what I'm saying?
We don't know.
First and foremost, you have to have a musical chemistry with your band and. In a passion and intensity and a technique and ability and craft and things like that in order to create a sound that feels like the truth. And then if you say something on top of that is actually true, that's when it can be very important.
But as a musician, sometimes, I don't know if it happens to you, but with some people there is a demand, to please people because you're also an entertainer, to get through to people you have to entertain them. So how do you find the balance, between entertaining them and creating awareness? So,
well, I mean, I've been very fortunate in that from Rage Against the Machine onward, there's, it's been, my music is, I've made 19 records in my career, 19 records. And it's been 19 records of absolutely uncompromised music. And miraculously, people keep coming to the shows.
So you never thought you're going to be popular?
No, heavens no.
Okay,
heavens, no.
So you don't want to be popular, or?
Well, no, I mean it was never. Well, I'll tell you this. I was before I was in Rage Against the Machine. I was in another band that tried to be popular and tried to have commercial success, and we did the things the record company told us to do. We didn't do the things they told us not to do. You know what I'm saying? And that band was not successful. And so I was 27 years old. I was dropped from my record label. I was done. Like I had my chance to be a rock star, and I had failed. So I made a vow to myself that I was never going to play another note of music that I didn't believe in. And so I played music that I really liked and helped form a band that was about things that I really cared about with zero. I cannot tell you. Like when Rage Against the Machine formed, we didn't have a hope of even playing a show in a club. There were no Hollywood clubs that had a Mexican guy and a half-black guy and a Jewish guy with neo-Marxist politics playing Black Sabbath, Run DMC. So there was none, zero. So we just made music that was very, very honest. And, there's a lesson in this, is that is the music that connected with a global audience.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. So, but have you, ever, of course you would have faced backlash. So what would be, the biggest backlash, and how did you deal with that?
I would say the biggest backlash was probably in the aftermath of 9/11. Where there was a radio conglomerate that was in charge of hundreds of radio stations in the United States. They decided the programming, and they decided in the aftermath of 9/11 that there were certain songs that should not be played on any of these 200 radio stations. And it was John Lennon's Imagine. It was You Dropped a Bomb on Me by the Gap Band. It was Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles. And notably, it was the entire Rage Against the Machine catalog was singled out to not be played on any station.
That's bad.
I mean, I would say during a time when it was maybe one of the most important times in United States history for nuanced reflection on the country's place in the world, bands that had opinions about that were censored. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge. We didn't. I mean, how did we respond to that? We just, at the time, I think we had just started the band Audioslave, so we were on a different path. But we just, the key thing for me has been that I've always relied on whether you sell a million records or whether you sell 10 records to make sure that it is authentic and that it is honest. And if you do that, I can look at myself in the mirror. I don't go like, oh, that record we sure tried, sold out, and I feel embarrassed about it. If you just make music that you believe in, to me that's been like the path to follow.
But this is the road less traveled. Like taking your path. Have you ever felt defeated at one point? Because
I really
changes are
like
slow.
the vow that I made on that day when my other band got dropped is one that I really believe in. Like I was ready to be in a band like Rage Against the Machine and never play a show. Like I was content to do that because I was like, it's real. Like I had a record deal and it sucked. Like it was. There was nothing good about it. I felt compromised and I didn't make any money and I wasn't singing about things that mattered and so to me it was much better. Like I've made 4 records of acoustic music under the name of the Night Watchman that have sold very few records, but have been some of the most honest and important music that I've ever made. I'm just as proud of my record One Man Revolution as I am of the first Rage Against the Machine record. They both have the same level of authenticity to them. And whether it's the new Prophets of Rage or my own new record, the Atlas Underground record, I continue to make music that I really believe in, and then let the chips fall where they may.
But with Audioslave, you're not as political, right?
No, so Audioslave. The lesson with Audioslave that I learned when we formed Audioslave, I was determined that Audioslave was going to be more political than Rage Against the Machine.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I thought that Rage Against the Machine fell short because we spent so much time arguing about BS and not enough time changing the world. That's the way I looked at it. And so with Audioslave, I was like, we're going to be but then it occurred to me in the early stages of Audioslave that I was the only one that was into that particular strategy. And I firmly believe in order for a band to be great, it has to be authentic. You have to find out what it really is, musically and personally. And so Audioslave was a band that lyrically was not certainly was not as political as Rage Against the Machine, but it opened the window for me to form the
Night Watchman?
The Night Watchman began during that time, as well as the organization Axis of Justice were formed because Audioslave was not going to fulfill kind of my political activist creative needs. I began an acoustic career, which has been fantastic, and formed a grassroots organization too.
So can you tell me on that note, so about Axis of Justice, you told me a little bit about your inspiration. So maybe can you tell me a bit more about the process of creating it?
Sure.
What work you have done?
Axis of Justice came from the genesis of Axis of Justice was there was a heavy metal concert tour called Ozfest, like Ozzy Osbourne, Ozfest. And one year I went to a show in San Bernardino, which is sort of a rural part near Los Angeles, and I saw many like white power tattoos, like Nazi tattoos, and then I looked at the bands, and the bands that day on stage, every band had at least one non-white member, and I thought this is such a crazy juxtaposition of these kind of like racist crowd and multiracial bands. And I said, somebody needs to do something about that. So I contacted Serj Tankian, the singer of System of a Down. I believe they were playing that year. Year they were playing on Ozfest. And I told him my thoughts about this. And I said, we need to have a presence at these heavy metal shows that is a anti-racist thing. And so we sat down and we talked about it. And the question that people had been asking both of us throughout our entire careers was how do I get involved? Like, I'm inspired by the music of System of a Down or Rage Against the Machine or whatever. How do I get involved? So we formed an organization. Now it's a lot easier with social media. Yes. But at the time, we had a website that if you lived in Illinois and you were interested in prison reform issues, you would click Illinois and prison reform issues, and then the organizations in Illinois would come up. So you could... so it was a way of connecting our audiences with real grassroots action. Okay.
So do you think it's... more effective if, to move people with music, especially, like with organization such as Axis of Justice, does your music or your popularity, help, people to move, or is it, it's not as easy as it sounds? Or
Well, I would say what I learned from Axis of Justice is I'm a better guitar player than I am an organizer.
That's another skill.
That's an entirely different skill set. I'm like, no one agrees on, much like in a band, no one agrees on anything. We can't get anything done. We don't have any money. What are we? Like all these problems. I'm like, these are the activist problems. I just want to play guitar. Can I just play guitar and sing about this stuff? So that was actually one of the lessons.
Okay, I like that you're being honest.
That I realized what my strengths were,
Okay.
and my strengths are in kind of curating artistic experiences, whether they're on records or in concert venues or in benefit shows or activist musical events, to sort of provoke and inspire. That's my strength.
Yes.
My strength is not running an organization that has an office and 6 people. So,
But it is still there.
Access of Justice. Now it is.
Okay.
Now how it exists now is we do like tours that will benefit particular causes in particular cities, where then the musicians play the tour, but then are also involved in each city in the work of the organization that the show benefits.
So it
you know
plays more to your strength.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
You find your niche.
We don't have an office anymore. We used to have an office, and it didn't work so well. The way that I look at it is, there are people that do that a lot better than I do. You know what I'm saying? So we amplify and highlight their work and direct energies of our fans towards them, rather than trying to shoulder that weight ourselves.
Oh, because there is a demand for that, because like every time, sometimes, activists, maybe they don't have like easy access to, celebrities who can elevate their,
I think that's a huge thing.
Activism.
And that's one of the things where, with Prophets of Rage, we're able to do in my solo stuff, and which Rage Against the Machine did to some extent, is the amount of publicity that we turn down would be so valuable to any organization that's trying to spread their message. You know what I'm saying? So that, I think, is one of the perks that we try to take advantage of.
Okay, speaking of collaboration, you have collaborated a lot with Amnesty International in the US. Yes. So maybe can you tell us a bit more, the work you did with them? How did you first get involved with them?
Amnesty International, I became aware of during the Amnesty International concert tours in the 80s. There was like the Bruce Springsteen, Peter Gabriel, and while at that time I was already politically active, it was very impressive to me. I remember this tour, they played, I think, 6 continents, 6 stadiums in 6 continents, and that rock and roll could be a vehicle to get political prisoners out of jail. That to me was a revelation. Rock and roll to me inspired me, and I Chuck D and Joe Strummer, and they sang words that I thought meant something. But this is a tangible thing where there's a concert, and then people who are wrongly imprisoned are no longer wrongly imprisoned. That to me was very important. So Amnesty International, I've been a supporter of. Years later, Amnesty, reached out to me to play shows, and as my night watchman, and so I was happy to do many shows for Amnesty International. It was always there when they called on me to support them.
Okay, so
one of my favorite recordings of music that I've done, there was an Amnesty International album, which I covered a Bob Dylan song on it, so that if you check, it's like, which was one of my favorites.
Why is it your favorite?
It was just it was really, for me, it was sort of the beginning of, on my most recent record, I combined EDM music with kind of my guitar playing, and this was the first example of that. It was kind of like it had beats and sort of this crazy loop thing with a Bob Dylan song that I covered. So
so how do you choose, which cause you would, you would support? Because
it's very difficult. It's very difficult. Well,
because you're going to be stretched thin if you.
There are so many that are deserving of support. On my more recent tours, like the solo tours, I've been. ACLU has made me. That's the American Civil Liberties Union in the United States, which is a sort of a broad rights organization. They made me the ambassador of prison reform. So that's an issue that I've chosen to focus on because it really speaks to at least in the United States, it speaks to the heart of America's great sin, which is racism. It's it's racism and sort of capitalism and racism come together in the prison industrial system that we have there, and so that's an issue that I've chosen to focus on. But the broader issue, which that's a very specific thing at a very specific time, but the broader issue is one of empowerment. I think that's the key thing. That is the key thing, and that if my music, and I'm pleased that people come up to me everywhere around the world and they say that it is been one of the factors that has perhaps helped them down a path where they've engaged in social justice issues. But the key thing is that you are an agent of history. That's it.
Yes.
Like I didn't know that growing up. I just thought I was a
Okay.
person who lived in a suburb that might one day, try to be a baseball player. That's it.
Yes.
But not that history was something you read about in books, not something that you participated in
Yes.
making. And that, I think, is if there's one message through 19 records, it's that you, whoever's hearing this right now, are an agent of history, and that you have your hands on the wheel of history. And you can help turn it in one way or another. Or you can abdicate and sit on the sidelines and let other sons of bitches steer the planet into a ditch.
Okay, life lessons from Tom Morello.
I mean, it's true.
to
It's,
the
it's absolutely
listeners.
true. There's always the option to sit it out and to let
Yes.
other people. Howard Zinn, who's a great U.S. historian, said, "You can't be neutral on a moving train. It's like the train is moving. The train is moving, and you can either." If it's moving in a good direction, you can help propel it. If it's moving in a bad direction, you need to stop it. But if you're just a passenger on it, then that's not so good.
Is it why you also still like to go on the ground, Like, you spend a day, as
Yeah.
we discussed, you spend a day volunteering, just,
Yeah.
become, how is it, is it more effective to be, on the ground from time to time? Or
Well,
what do you think?
I do that for myself, really, because it feels that's like I like things to be tangible.
Yes.
It's one thing to sing about it in songs and talk about it in interviews,
Okay.
and that too could be effective, and raise money for it, and play benefit concerts for it. But when you're actually working with I honestly think, and I said this today at the meeting, but from time to time I get these humanitarian awards, and frankly, it's embarrassing. It's because honestly, they love my music, and my music are about things they care about. But it is only sort of. It's only connected to the real work. And the real work is done by people like you. It really is. It's people who never get awards. It's people who never have banquets. It's people who never are ever asked to do an interview about something. And they're the ones that at sometimes great risk change the world.
So, but I think music has also played a role, in moving people. Don't you think so? And how effective do you think music
Absolutely.
can, to
I'll
put
tell
people
you this.
into action?
Well, I'll tell you that at least in my country, there's never been a successful social movement that hasn't had a great soundtrack.
Nice quote.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. It's true. I mean, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement to the anti-Vietnam War movement to the anti-Iraq War movement, like there's something in the combination of rhythm and rhyme that feels like music predates language. Beats and and there's something that feels like the truth deep inside us when you get that stuff right. And but then also music. People say, can music change the world? Well, music changed my world. And anything I've ever done that has impacted anyone's life or any issue was in part because of music and the way that the activist music of The Clash and Public Enemy made me think that I could make a difference in the world, that I was an agent of history.
Okay. So now we are facing the world that is getting more divisive. So politicians wager power on narrative of fear and disunity, blaming the marginalized people.
Yes.
So how do you think progressive artists such as yourself can and civil society movement across the world can build resistance against those demonization?
Well, I think you've accurately identified the problem.
Yes.
Is it's you blaming the victims,
Yes.
which is a very successful tactic and of a racist tactic that is being employed across the globe. And I think a very important thing in fighting back is understanding the root cause. And in the United States, at least, it's very elusive because, in my view, the root cause is Clinton, Bush, Obama. That there's been this funneling of the world's resources to the top 0.001% that liberal, conservative have all been engaged in, that has abandoned the working class. And now, when you're a white, working farmer, coal miner, factory worker, and you see that your children are in danger of having a sad economic future and a racist demagogue comes along and gives you an easy answer, the problem is the Mexicans.
Yes,
the problem is the
exactly.
Muslims. It's like, oh yeah, it sure is. It takes a much more kind of nuanced understanding of economics to realize that's not the problem at all. You and the Muslims and the Mexicans are all on the same side here. But
Yes.
as long as those
yeah.
politicians can keep us divided, then and unfortunately, it's a successful tactic that when people see it work they see it work with Brexit, they see it work
Yes.
with Trump, they see it work in
Exactly.
Brazil. That is a tactic by
It's
using
happening here as well.
racist dogma to continue to enrich the oligarchies in this country at the expense of not just people but of the planet. And we're at a historical crossroads of whether the planet will survive or not. And the only thing that's going to change it is you. So please help us. I'm a guitar player. You guys need to figure this out.
Listen up, guys. Okay, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your
I
stay in
appreciate it.
Jakarta.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Cheers.
Oke, terima kasih banyak sudah mendengarkan siaran ini. Buat yang punya ide, saran, atau kritik untuk podcast Orang Berani, yuk langsung kontak kami. Kirim pesan di Instagram kami, @amnestyindonesia. Ada Twitter, @amnestyindo. Ada Facebook, @amnestyindonesia. Dan Line, @AII-Indonesia. Jadi nggak ada alasan untuk nggak kirim pesannya, soalnya banyak banget tuh ya akun sosmednya Amnesty. Jangan lupa untuk tetap mendukung komitmen 9 agenda HAM Amnesty International Indonesia di bit.ly/komitmen 9 agenda HAM untuk membantu menyampaikan ke Presiden dan Parlemen terpilih bahwa masih banyak pekerjaan rumah di bidang HAM yang harus diselesaikan. Sampai jumpa teman-teman di episode berikutnya.